and welcome back to the Jet Press Podcast. My name is Justin Fried, and I'm joined as always by my man Mike Luciano. Mike, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I am feeling pretty good, especially considering all the rumors that we might have a new quarterback in town. So thanks so much for supporting this podcast, for listening to us. If you want to hear more of us, go and find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, wherever it is you get your podcast. Make sure to go find us on YouTube also, the Jet Press. Hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell so you get a notification on your phone whenever we go live. We have a full hour of Jets content for you because this was a busy week in the Jets fandom space, especially considering Derek Carr and all the rumors around Derek Carr. But I want to give the floor to Justin first because we found out, boy, did we find out how aggressive Raiders Twitter can be and how polarizing, to be very diplomatic, the Derek Carr can be. And Justin may have ignited a little mini civil war on Raiders Twitter, so I'll let him, Festivus style, air his grievances.
I appreciate that, Mike. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take credit for igniting a civil war. There has been a civil war on Raiders Twitter for the last 9 years, and it's all revolved around Derek Carr. For those who don't know, I previously covered the Raiders too, so I've been in those trenches. I've seen those fans. I've seen that fan base. I know that team. I've watched Derek Carr plenty over the years. There's been a civil war, and it's been between the pro Derek Carr fans and the anti Derek Carr party fans, faction, whatever you want to call them. And it's kind of like Jets fans have kind of got caught in the middle of that this offseason, and they're obviously more on the side right now of pro Derek Carr. They're supporting them. But I put out a tweet a few days ago, like 2 days ago now or something, basically just being like, the Raiders organization has failed Derek Carr, right? Like they failed to support him for 9 years. This is not saying that Derek Carr is blameless, which some people took that to be, because that's silly. Derek Carr is not Patrick Mahomes. He has his limitations as a quarterback. We all know that. But the Raiders organization failed to build around him. They failed to supply him with adequate coaching staffs. His offensive line, for the most part, has been terrible, other than earlier in his reign. He has never had a top 20 defense. I don't think it's a stretch by any means to say that the Raiders organization has been poorly run during Derek Carr's tenure. I think we can all agree on that, including should be most Raiders fans. In fact, when I put out that tweet, I didn't mention the Jets at all, right? I just put out that tweet. A lot of Raiders fans, so to my surprise, flocked to the replies and agreed with me. They were like, thank you for saying this. We agree with you. The Raiders have been very poorly run. We have failed Derek Carr, and they're, not smart for moving on. Whatever. That was I got a bunch of replies like that, right? A lot of that stuff. And I was like, this is great, because I know I've been on record on this podcast and in many other places in the past saying that I am not particularly fond of the Raiders fan base. Now, every fan base has its crazies. Every fan base has its lunatics. It's people that are just kind of wild, right? So against the status quo that they make these ridiculous takes. Every fan base has that. Jets fan base has it. Everyone does. What I've found is that I think that at least this has been my interpretation, is that the Raiders fan base has a greater percentage of those crazies. That's what I found. But I was, caught off guard. I was pleasantly surprised by these Raiders fans flocking to the defense, I guess, of the Jets, more so against their own organization. And I was like, that's interesting. Then the next day came, and I was flooded with different replies, because it found that those tweets found the anti-Carr side of Raiders Twitter, and they were none too pleased. But I will note, I don't think a single one of those tweets, and I tried to look at as many as I could, I don't think a single one of those tweets disagreed with what I was saying. Instead, they were like, dude, you covered the Jets. How are you saying this? Look, the Jets organization for the past 9 years has been very poorly run as well. No one is arguing against that. I'm not arguing against that. The Jets organization has been bad, has historically been bad. They've been bad at developing quarterbacks. They've been bad at building around their quarterbacks.
So have the Raiders.
So have the Raiders.
Your crap stinks too, man.
Exactly. Like, you can make the argument that both Sam Darnold and Geno Smith sort of failed in New York because the Jets failed to build around them. It certainly didn't help them. I think it's less so with Zach Wilson, but a lot more so with Sam Darnold and Geno Smith. I'm not disagreeing with that. But it seems as though Raiders fans, that was, or at least the anti-Carr party, as you will call them, that was their defense for why the Raiders have not failed the organization. And I would like to point out that the Raiders have not won a playoff game since 2002. In fact, they've only been in 2. So I don't want to make that about that. This isn't a Jets versus Raiders debate, because look, we both suck. Like, both of these organizations have been bad. It's more so just, hey, the Raiders have failed to build around Derek Carr.
And that failure to build around him, if we're being honest, is probably going to lead into the Jets based on how the latest rumblings are looking. These are from Bet Online. These are the latest odds for Derek Carr, his next team. The Jets, overwhelming favorites at minus 300 after a nice little wining and dining at an Italian restaurant up in North Jersey, which was circulating around Jets Twitter. They have jumped way to the front of the pack here. Number 2 would be the Carolina Panthers at plus 225. Number 3, the New Orleans Saints at plus 250. After that, you get Tampa at plus 900, and beyond that, it's just fantasy land. They're trying to take money from people. Now, one thing I found interesting, because this is the big money quote that's going around not only Jets Twitter, but NFL Twitter, is that they promised Derek Carr that he could be a first ballot Hall of Famer if he slays the dragon and he wins a Super Bowl with the New York Jets. And I get to a degree that that's being grandiose and you're being a showman and you're being a salesman and you want to convince him. But at the same time, think of what that does for Derek Carr's legacy. Because I want to bring up a parallel to Matthew Stafford in Detroit. Because I don't think Derek Carr is as good as Matthew Stafford, but the parallels are frightening in terms of this situation where he goes to historically, I know the Raiders have some Super Bowls, the Lions don't. But over the last 20 years, 25 years, you can't get more dysfunctional, maybe Cleveland, than Detroit and the then Oakland, now Las Vegas Raiders. And Stafford had a lot of these similar debates going on around him where it was, oh, is it him himself? He can't win in the postseason. Is it the coaches? Is they never supported him right? And then he goes to the Rams, who supported him properly with good coaching and receivers and an offensive line and a defense worth a damn, and he won the Super Bowl immediately. Now, I don't know if Derek Carr is going to do that, but I definitely think that if you just insert him into this Jets team, I think that there's a lot of momentum building towards a postseason appearance and possibly a postseason game that they could win. Because we've talked about this till we're blue in the face. Derek Carr can rip it downfield, smart guy, doesn't get hurt a lot. The cold weather thing is what it is. But if you're in the Derek Carr camp, especially over the Aaron Rodgers camp for the Jets, this has been a great week for you.
I completely agree. I just, on the cold weather thing, how many Jets games last year, how many home games did the Jets play that were under 40 degrees? One, maybe. Like, it's not like that's even a common occurrence. This isn't Buffalo. Like, it's not like
the playoffs are going to be in January.
Sure, but let's get there first. Let's not to hold up the playoffs talk, right? Like, but we got to get there first, right? But I think that some of that, a lot of that is overblown. First, I do want to put you on the spot. What do you think Derek Carr ordered for lunch? I want to get your take on that.
He seems like a veal saltimbocca kind of guy, or he just went basic chicken parm because he's like a West Coast guy, like a California guy.
That was very Jersey Italian of you, that first answer. That was very Jersey Italian. That checks out. But yeah, I think there's a lot of steam coming off of that meeting. And by all accounts, both sides came out of it feeling very, very good about the potential fit. It was reported that any concerns that either side had were completely erased. The Jets came away feeling that they can win with Derek Carr, that they can not only compete with him, but maybe that they could even win a Super Bowl. Like, that's kind of the message they were at least relaying to Derek Carr. How much of that is real and how much of it is just, sellers got to sell, right? I don't know. But either way, do what you got to do to get that guy in the building. You're trying to convince Derek Carr that New York is the place to be. You sell him on, hey, this could be your legacy. Like you mentioned, Matthew Stafford. I think it's a fair comparison. And also, you got to remember, and then obviously the Jets aren't the Rams. The Jets don't have the roster or the coaching staff that the Rams did. But winning in New York is better, like is more impactful to someone's legacy than winning anywhere. If Derek Carr comes here and he wins a Super Bowl with the Jets, he's a legend forever. Like, he is a legend forever. They signed this guy to be their franchise savior. I think he's even, like, it's a different kind of legend than like Eli Manning, because at least the Giants had some semblance of history with quarterbacks. The Jets don't have that. Like, they have nothing. They have been looking for their next Joe Namath for 50 years now, right?
Let's not erase Ken O'Brien here all of a sudden.
Richard Todd stands out there. I'm sorry,
Richard Todd. I mean, they still have those "In Todd We Trust" stickers everywhere, and then AJ Dewey picking them off 3 times. Let's not put Richard Todd and Ken O'Brien.
That's
My
fair.
boy Ken O'Brien in the same sentence.
Look, and Chad Pennington had his moments, right? He had his moments, sure. But and Josh McCown that one year, right? But look, the Jets.
That's how far down we're going. We
I
gotta be
was
like, remember that one year Josh McCown was okay?
I was doing some digging on Derek Carr stats, right? So Derek Carr, I think it was like his completion percentage over the last four years or something like that is like 66 point something. Only two Jets have ever had a season with a higher completion percentage, and it was Chad Pennington and Josh McCown. And I was like, that's amazing. But if Derek Carr comes to New York and he wins a Super Bowl, I'm not sure he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but that goes a long way into improving his legacy, changing the entire narrative around him, because the narrative right now around him is that he's not a winner. Like, that is the narrative with Derek Carr. I think if you ask any casual football fan on the street and you ask them, what are your thoughts on Derek Carr?
He's
They'll
not
be like,
a winner.
right.
We can't win the big one.
Right. The people, the Joe Benignos calling in the WFAN, whoever, right? Like, the people like that, he's not a winner. Like, he hasn't won a playoff game, right? Like, that's going to be the narrative around him until he wins a playoff game. And so if he comes to New York, wins a Super Bowl, I'm not going to say he's a first ballot Hall of Famer like the Jets are trying to imply to him, but it definitely changes his legacy and improves it. And if that's what he cares about, if that's what he's looking for, there's no better landing spot than New York.
I want to bring up a comment by Mark here where he said, would you label Carr as elite? If not, what level is he? I don't think he's elite. I would probably say he's in that 10 to 15 range. And I know that some Jets fans have some trepidation about putting all their eggs in this 10 to 15th best quarterback basket because you got all these great quarterbacks in the AFC. Patrick Mahomes, obviously, just the Death Star offense they got over there. Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence. Common wisdom would say, well, how are you going to break through the AFC with one of those guys at quarterback? And that's understandable, especially because Derek Carr the last couple of years was unable to break through it. At the same time, like, the odds of getting a guy like a Mahomes or Burrow, unless Aaron Rodgers comes to New York, erases all doubts about retiring, and doesn't play like he did last year, which is a lot of ifs, you're not going to get that. So all you can do is get the best guy available, which is probably Carr, trust in this defense, trust in Robert Saleh's coaching, and just hope you get a couple lucky breaks that go your way. Like, you hate to reduce football to that level of randomness, but that's really the best plan the Jets have for success in the AFC in the short term. So don't get caught up on this, is he going to beat Patrick Mahomes? Like, sometimes you just got to go and get the best guy available and give him your best shot. That's really all the Jets can do here.
You're right. And I think people overlook that randomness factor. Like, any team on any given year, if you make the playoffs, you go win a Super Bowl. It's true. So much of it comes down to injury luck. Like, can Derek Carr beat Patrick Mahomes? Sure. Like, his team, a Derek Carr-led team, can beat a Patrick Mahomes-led team. Absolutely. He can beat Josh Allen. He can beat Joe Burrow. He can beat Justin Herbert. That's not saying he's better than those guys, but it can happen. And it's not like he's like, you're just throwing any quarterback out there. Like, it's not like we're saying, oh yeah, Zach Wilson can beat Patrick Mahomes. Like, Derek Carr obviously is a significant step below the top quarterbacks in the NFL, but he's still a very good quarterback, right? And if you get to the playoffs with Derek Carr, you can win a Super Bowl. It's not saying it's super likely. It's not saying that you're going to be the favorites, because you're not going to be, but you can get there. And also, we've talked about this before. Derek Carr doesn't have to be, or Aaron Rodgers. Like, Aaron is the same situation. They're not 4, 5, 6 year solutions. I don't think the Jets would be signing Derek Carr thinking that he's going to be their quarterback in 2027. I really don't think so. If they get Derek Carr, they're hoping, okay, we can stabilize us or stabilize our job statuses, make the playoffs, stabilize this roster, get a good quarterback in place that can maximize the talent here, continue to develop guys like Garrett Wilson, like Breece Hall, like Elijah Moore, and then hopefully, if you find some success with him, you could try and draft his replacement in the future. That's what you're hoping for with him. That's what you're hoping for with Rodgers.
Do we not just see Jalen Hurts get to a Super Bowl and almost win it, if not for the vengeful fingers of the football gods and having Patrick Mahomes go crazy?
Yeah.
Like, Jalen Hurts, I think, is probably a little bit better than Derek Carr, but at least I think there's at least some wiggle room where you could argue in certain aspects Carr. Like, I think Carr probably, just in terms of raw arm talent, is better than Jalen Hurts in terms of just the number of throws he can make from different positions and angles. So if you bring a guy like that onto a team that allegedly is going to finally get the offensive line right, that's going to be the big question. If they finally do it, they got a running game. If Breece Hall's healthy, they got receivers. They got a new offensive coaching staff. I'm not a Nathaniel Hackett fan, but apparently the entire league thinks this guy is in incredibly high regard. And just the Broncos thing was just bad fit, wrong place, wrong time, and then one of the best defenses in the league, you absolutely can compete with any team in the AFC with that. Doesn't mean you're going to be the number one seed, but that's a formula for success.
Yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo was 15 minutes away from winning a Super Bowl, and that's recent. Like I know
Nick
people
Foles did it.
right, Nick Foles. People bring up like Trent Dilfer or whatever. Like that was a long time ago. Jimmy Garoppolo a few years ago was 15 minutes away from winning a Super Bowl, and he very nearly did it.
Case Keenum almost got to that one.
He did. Case Keenum, dude. That Minneapolis Miracle game will forever be one of
the
my
quarterbacks in those championship games were Tom Brady, Blake Bortles, Case Keenum, and Nick Foles. If you believe in the roster, any sort of upgraded quarterback beyond just, that was not NFL quarterback play we saw last year.
Yeah.
Even baseline competency has this team in the playoffs. And if you go slightly above it with a guy like Carr, why couldn't they make a run?
They absolutely can. I'm totally with you. And if they bring in someone like a Derek Carr or an Aaron Rodgers, it's going to be interesting to see what the Jets do in free agency, kind of connecting to them, because there's a few free agents, both from the Raiders and the Packers, who the Jets might want to pair with their new quarterback, whether that is Derek Carr, whether that's Aaron Rodgers. I think the most obvious fit for me, if we're looking at the Packers first, the most obvious fit for me, I think, is Randall Cobb. Cobb's one of those guys he's been with Rodgers his entire career, or virtually his entire career. He had those like couple stints in Dallas and Houston, but he returned to Green Bay. He's had like a decade with them. He's not the player he used to be. I don't think he's a starting caliber wide receiver at this point. He's more of a number 4. But if the Jets do go out and trade for Aaron Rodgers, Randall Cobb's a free agent. I'd be very surprised if Rodgers or Cobb wasn't like, hey, we want to run this back for another year. We want to come here. Rodgers or Cobb can come here for pretty cheap. Like, I don't think it would cost much to get him, especially if he's like, hey, I want to play with Aaron Rodgers for another year. So if he doesn't retire, which he could, well, both of them, if Rodgers and Cobb don't retire, because both of them could. But if they do both come back and if the Jets get Rodgers, I think Cobb makes a ton of sense for the Jets.
One guy I've been looking at, because I do agree with the whole Cobb thing in terms of Aaron Rodgers, for whatever reason, that's his binky. He needs him around. I don't know what it is, because he's not
him and Jake Kumaro.
Him and Jake Kumaro, for some reason, he just loves these guys. I don't know what it is, but if that helps you at all with Aaron Rodgers and that's your stated goal, it's one of those things where I guess you got to hold your nose and make him one of the 53 guys. See, I'm more interested in somebody potentially on the defensive side of the ball. Now, I know a defensive end or a defensive lineman is not going to choose his next team because he could play with Derek Carr. At the same time, there is a guy out there who fits a lot of what the Jets look for in free agency, and that's Cleveland Ferrell. Cleveland Ferrell went 4th overall in the 2019 draft, which I know it made it seem like the worst pick of all time originally, but I'm thinking like, all right, I could see it working, mostly because he was projected to be kind of a late first-round pick. He was like in the 20s. That was on that loaded Clemson line with him and Christian Wilkins and Austin Bryant and one other guy. I can't remember the 4th guy off the top of my head, but I remembered Austin Bryant, who was the worst of the 4. but Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence was on that line. Yeah, so that was a loaded line. Cleveland Ferrell is probably the 3rd best player on that line. He ends up going 4th overall. But I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe it'll work. And I'm going to be quite honest, he was horrible with the Raiders. I mean, his first year, I believe he had 4.5 sacks. And in his 4-year career, only 10 sacks. So that is not production that you want to clamor for. At the same time, Joe Douglas has kind of made a habit of taking former first-round picks and giving them another whirl, saying, all right, maybe it could work out here. He did it with Corey Davis, who didn't re-sign with the Titans and never kind of became that number 1 receiver that they thought he would. He did it with Jared Davis, the linebacker, formerly of the Detroit Lions. He came here for a year and kind of confirmed all our priors that he kind of stunk. And then he was gone. And he also did it this year with Solomon Thomas, who for being a backup, I thought was a pretty solid backup lineman. So if Douglas keeps that philosophy, I could see Ferrell rejoining Carr and coming to the Jets just to provide some backup, some insurance for a guy like Jermaine Johnson.
I mean, we know Robert Saleh loves having a deep defensive line. We know that. We know that they carried 7 on the active roster last year. Ferrell's fine. Like, he's a fine guy if you want to have him as a rotational player. I don't think he's going to be, someone who's going to be playing more than 20, 30% snaps per game, but that's fine. Like, it would be very, very similar to the Solomon Thomas signing. Like, I feel like that'd be almost an identical move to what they made with Thomas, where it's just a former high draft pick, although at least Thomas, I think, was more of more of a consensus top draft pick at that time. Like I think most people had Solomon Thomas going in top 5. Cleveland Farrell was definitely an out there pick. Most people had him in like the teens to 20s. But still a former top pick, bringing him in just to compete for rotational snaps on the defensive line. It makes sense. And if he wants to follow Carr, I don't know if they're close or not, but if he wants to follow him, that makes sense. Another Raiders guy that they could be interested in, I'm going to go back to the offensive side of the ball, another wide receiver. And again, this wouldn't be somebody that's going to be replacing Corey Davis or playing a significant role. But I can see them going after someone like Mac Hollins. He's a free agent. Basically, he's been just a depth wide receiver for his entire career. He was with Philly, with Miami, didn't really do much. In fact, he never had more than 16 catches in a season up until this year, where out of nowhere, the dude gets 94 targets, started pretty much the entire year, finished 57 catches, 690 yards. He's not a starting receiver. Like, I think we know that. We've talked about this in the past about how Derek Carr was throwing to Mac Hollins as his number 2 wide receiver last year for pretty much the entire year.
And that contributed to his production decline.
It did. He's not a starting caliber receiver. But if the Jets want to bring him in, he obviously have found plenty of success with Carr last year. I mean, this was by far the best year of his career. If him and Carr have some kind of a rapport together, you could bring him in. He could be your wide receiver 4. I'd be cool with that. He's first of all, he's a good special teamer. He's always been that throughout his career. That's how he stuck around as much as he has. Good size, speed combination. Totally someone I'd be fine bringing in as your wide receiver 4. Not someone I want to compete for a starting job, but if he's your number 4, I'm cool with that.
I think he'd make sense to Denzel Mims replacement, because I think it's finally time to just rip the Band-Aid off on Denzel Mims. Like, why would Denzel Mims even want to be back? Like, but don't both parties want a fresh start?
See, what it sounds like from what I've seen with like reports is that, and again, who knows how much of this is smoke? Maybe they're trying to up his trade value, but it seems like the Jets are optimistic that Mims will be better with Nathaniel Hackett. They never saw him as a fit with Mike LaFleur. They butted heads. I think or what's been reported, they believe that he will be a better fit with Nathaniel Hackett. That does not mean that they're going to rely on him as a starting receiver. That doesn't mean they won't trade him on the draft, whatever. If they get like a 5th round pick for him, which I don't know which team would do that, but if they get a 5th round pick for him, I would totally move him. Like, I totally would move on from him at that point. But I do agree. Mac Hollins is basically an older Denzel Mims who can play special teams. Like, that's pretty much what he is, and better at this stage.
I'm going to one-up you in the receiver category, because I think there's a guy that actually could be a Corey Davis replacement. And that's Alan Lazard, who was the, I guess, number 1 receiver de facto in Green Bay last year. I know Christian Watson kind of came on late and Romeo Doubs had a little bit, but Alan Lazard was his go-to guy, which is a big step down from Devontae Adams, obviously. But at the same time, Alan Lazard is basically like a tight end playing receiver. I mean, he's 6'5", 227 pounds he's listed at. That is incredibly tough to jam at the line of scrimmage. And if he's a willing blocker, which the Jets want you to be because of how much they love that Shanahan outside zone-y stuff and how much Hackett's pretty much going to run the same thing, you need a guy like Lazard on the edge. So if they get rid of Davis and they add a guy in Lazard who just had his best year, 60 catches, 788 yards, 6 touchdowns, 14 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons. That gives them not only a Davis replacement in terms of blocking, it also gives them a great red zone target, which was a big problem for them last year. It was being effective in the red zone. We all remember that Vikings game where they got to the 5-yard line, it seemed like 6 times and never got a touchdown. We get it.
Braxton Berrios drops.
Oh, Braxton Berrios. Why is he on this team?
He probably won't be.
He was on the team for vibes. They gave him a vibes-based contract. You can't do that.
Look, no, I will. I don't want to play revisionist history. I will say that I very much liked the Braxton Berrios contract when they gave it out. I thought it was a good deal. He was a very solid depth receiver in 2021 and a damn good return. Like, he was a really very valuable player in 2021. Then it kind of all unraveled this year. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was the hair. I don't know what he did, but he just basically everything that was good about him in 2021 went away. He was not reliable. I mean, he didn't drop a pass in 2020. In 2021, he had dropped 3 combined. I actually recently saw the stat. He had dropped 3 passes in his entire career going into this year, and he dropped 3 more this year, including,
of course. Well, because he was never getting thrown the ball.
No, he had a decent amount of like targets. He had more targets last year than this year, I believe. He only had 32 targets this year. He had 55 and 65 the years before that, and he had total drops amongst them 3, I think, in his entire career before that.
Oh my goodness.
So he fell off a cliff, and then of course, as a punt returner, he just made a ton of very questionable decisions late in the year, and he did nothing to add, to make up for that. Like he wasn't exactly explosive as a punt returner or kick returner. He didn't really do anything. And that sense of reliability that they had with him was gone. So I do think they'll move on from Berrios. On Allen Lazard, I completely agree with you. I think he's probably my favorite wide receiver free agent target for the Jets. It's a pretty weak wide receiver class. I mean, I know Juju's out there, Odell. Like there's a few guys out there.
Odell's like an NFT at this point. It's just complete. Just complete. Like they're making up the value at this point. He's 31 and he's got 1 billion knee injuries.
Not that Madden ratings mean anything at all, but I was just recently playing Madden with a buddy of mine, and I saw that Odell Beckham was an 86 overall, and I was like, "That is
86.
He is higher than Garrett Wilson." And
were you playing Madden like Madden 21?
Nope. Is the most recent Madden, the most recent roster update. He is higher rated than Garrett Wilson, and I'm
Good Lord,
that is insane. Sauce, by the way, is not even a 90, so take that for what you will.
I wonder why the game gets like a 1 out of 10 on Metacritic every year.
Oh, I can go on a rant about Madden, dude. We're not gonna do that now, though. But yeah,
we absolutely could, because I'm with you on that. But
it is terrible. But yeah, I really do like Allen Lazard as a free agent target. Even if the Jets don't get Aaron Rodgers, I still like Lazard as a free agent target. Like the other guys we're talking about, like Hollins and Cobb, and I guess Farrell, sort of like they're more so like if the Jets add Carr or if they add Rodgers, this makes sense. I think Lazard makes sense regardless. He's basically a great replacement for Corey Davis. He very much fills that same role. Just a big body dude. I'm not sure that he's a high end number 2 wide receiver. He's more of a low end number 2, more of like a number 2, number 3, I think.
But allegedly you have your number 1 in Garrett Wilson. So
exactly. If your wide receiver, say quartet, right? If you're going into next year, if your wide receiver quartet is Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, Elijah Moore, and then maybe you draft someone in the middle rounds, I'm all for that. Like, sign me up for that. I think that's a good wide receiver quartet. You got the 2 tight ends in Conklin and Uzama. I'm very happy with that. I like Lazard. I think that's a good.
You can win with those pieces easily. Finally stop pining for the halcyon days of the Rex Ryan era, which we just got an update on, because just when it looked like Rex Ryan was going to settle into TV forever, what do you know? He gets an interview with the Denver Broncos to potentially be Sean Payton's defensive coordinator after Giro Rivera was not retained and became the defensive coordinator with the Carolina Panthers. And I'm really interested to see how this works, because I genuinely have no idea, because at the same time, we all remember those great Rex defenses, not only with the Jets, but with Baltimore before. And he was really innovative, really on the cutting edge of things. And obviously comes from great pedigree, his father, Buddy Ryan, in terms of the defenses that he helped create and establish. Let's just look at his defenses since 2011. 20th in points, 20th in points, 19th in points, 24th in points, and then his 2 years in Buffalo, 15th and 16th. So, and that is with the league not having changed to the degree it has in 2016. Like, think about the NFL in 2016 and how monumentally different it was. I mean, Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston were up-and-coming young prospects. That was how long ago 2016 was. And he looked a little outdated then. So you're going to bring him back in after, 7 years on Get Up doing hot takes? I have my questions. But at the same time, this is a guy who maybe is top 5 in the world in terms of just pure passion for football and how much he loves football, and just bring me players and I'll coach them up. Yeah, and you could tell. None of that's phony. So if he lands in a situation like Denver that is ready to win now, they have tons of good players. So the infrastructure is there. He's not going to be developing a bunch of rookies on a bad team. There's enough ingredients there where he can make something out of it, I think.
I agree. And I want to give you a shout out for the little caption you have here. I know people listening won't hear it, but under where it says Rex Ryan stepping into Denver, you said Ryan putting his best foot forward with the Broncos.
He's really kicking off something here, I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
He's towing the line between
exactly. Well, yeah, if you know, you know, right? But I agree with you. I share the same kind of concerns. What's fun about the Denver fit is that they just brought in Mike Westhoff as well. So you'd have like a reunion there between Rex and Mike Westhoff. Also, I believe their defensive line coach is Marcus Dixon, who played under Rex in with the Jets, the defensive tackle. So that's really fun too. But I agree with you. I would have serious concerns about him adapting. Like, the dude has not coached in the NFL in 7 years. He hasn't been a defensive coordinator in like 15 years, right? It has been a really, really long time for him to kind of take that same role in Denver. He hasn't coached at any level in like 7 years. So I'm not sure what his defense would look like in 2023, I'd be fascinated. I'd be very interested. I'd love to see him interact with Russell Wilson. I think that'd be hilarious. I'd love to see
Oh
him
my!
interact
I
with
didn't even consider that. Oh my
Dude,
goodness!
I need to see that. If the Broncos hire Rex Ryan, they need to be on Hard Knocks. We need to find a way to get them on Hard Knocks, find a way to do something where we just get video production from that team where we're seeing Rex interact with Russell Wilson, we're seeing him interact with Sean Payton. I want to see him interact with that entire team because I think that'd be hilarious.
Let's go get a goddamn snack.
Yeah. From a football perspective, I don't know if the fit is great because he's just it's so hard to make of what he would look like in 2023 and what that defense would look like. But from a pure entertainment standpoint, I mean, sign me up. I'm all for it.
Now, here's the pro Rex camp would compare it, I think, favorably to a guy like Dick Vermeil, who Dick Vermeil took like 15 years off coaching. He was in the broadcast booth. And one of the things that he mentioned when he was in the broadcast booth, I mean, he went around to every single team multiple times and just through osmosis picked up all sorts of new ideas and plays and philosophies. And then he goes to the Rams and wins a championship. I know he had the greatest show on turf, but I mean, he helped put that team together. He deserves credit for that. So if you want to take that opinion, maybe Rex Ryan's been talking to some guys and picking up something. Like he's not going to be clueless. He's not going to run the 46 defense in 2023. There's enough. If he did, he'd probably turn into a big heel in Denver. But
Look, I think that Rex is a shoe-in for the job. I just hope he doesn't get cold feet.
Something arch. I don't know.
I love puns, man. There's a sock pun in there too. I hope his defense doesn't. I hope it doesn't suck. I don't.
Come on, no, we had it going, and then
did we really though? Did we actually have it going, or was that?
Yeah, I feel we had like 7 good ones right off the bat, and then
good as a stretch. Good as a stretch. Kind of. I was trying to make another one there. I'm not going to do it because it's just terrible. I do think it'd be really fun, though. I would love to see Rex in Denver. I think it'd be hilarious. Again, from an on-field perspective, I don't know. I do agree with you. I don't think he's going to, we need to give Rex enough credit because it's not like the dude. He may be an experienced coordinator or experienced defensive mind who hasn't coached the NFL in a while, but when he was there, he was one of the best defensive minds in football. So I do think we need to give him some credit. Hopefully he adapts if he does go to Denver. I want to see it happen. Just again, I think it'd be hilarious. I really do.
That's for sure. There's going to be some comedic element there, but we can't focus on the Broncos too much because we have to do some Jets draft talk, which we're going to round out the show with. We got 2 topics we want to touch on: our weekly draft spotlight, but we also want to look at some of the mid-round quarterbacks because this idea has been kind of bubbling around Jets Twitter for a little bit, at least the idea of taking a quarterback in the 2nd or 3rd round, if potentially you get a guy like a Rodgers or even a guy like a Carr to develop into maybe a long-term successor. Now, this quarterback class is incredibly stratified because you have a clear top 4 guys in whatever order you want. We've discussed them on the past, at least Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. We've discussed them. And then you have a big miasma of day 3 guys where it's pick your favorite order. I have guys that I like, guys like Jake Hayner, guys like Tyson Bagent, who was at the Senior Bowl, who, by the way, his dad is a champion arm wrestler. So go and look that up.
I think you mentioned that last time, I think.
But the 2 guys who were considered 2nd to 3rd round picks are funny to me because you could not get philosophically 2 more different prospects in terms of the traits that they're good at and the traits that they're bad at. And that is Hendon Hooker of Tennessee and Tanner McKee of Stanford. And I want to go dive into Hooker first, who spent 3 years at Virginia Tech, put up okay numbers. Then he goes to Tennessee and explodes. 69% completion, 6,000 yards, 9.5 yards per attempt. That is ridiculous. 58 passing touchdowns, 5 interceptions. In the SEC, 5 interceptions while running for 10 touchdowns and 1,000 yards. So you would think, oh my goodness, that is elite production in the SEC on top of the fact that he's 6'4", 218, fantastic mobility, maybe the best deep ball thrower of any of the quarterbacks in this draft. I mean, look at all the throws Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman were running under during his time with Tennessee. And he performed well in the big games. I mean, he sliced up Nick Saban. So what's the concern? Well, Hooker is going to be 25 years old as a rookie, which limits the developmental upside. Because at least with Joe Burrow being old, he was going to start right away and you knew he was going to be good right away. Hendon Hooker, you don't know that. So immediately by his 2nd year in the league, he's going to be 26 years old and older than guys like Daniel Jones. That's a little bit frightening. On top of the fact he also has an ACL injury that he's recovering from, so you don't even know if you're going to get 100% healthy Hendon Hooker. Let's say that 5 times fast. by the time the season starts. And also that I've railed against offenses like what Lane Kiffin is running at Ole Miss and what Art Briles used to do at Baylor, thanks to Bryce Petty scarring me. I mean, Josh Heupel is a descendant of those trees. That offense was not making NFL reads. It was, you're going to get the ball after we snap it within 7 seconds. This guy's going to be open in a second and a half, throw to that guy. So he's going to have to basically go from doing pre-algebra to high-level calculus immediately, which is really going to eat into his pro potential. On the complete flip side, you have Tanner McKee at Stanford, and a lot of the draft guys, a lot of the casual fans were saying, why is this guy even a pro prospect I have to care about? Because he was 6-16 over his last 2 years as a starting quarterback at Stanford with 2 NFL receivers in Elijah Higgins and Michael Wilson. So it wasn't necessarily a lack of talent. He only threw for 28 touchdowns in those 2 years with 15 interceptions. And I believe my grandmother could beat him in a 40-yard dash. He just does not. He's just a slow, plodding athlete. Why is he a prospect? Because if you were doing a Hollywood movie, like a Draft Day sequel, and you wanted a quarterback up on a board, it would look like Tanner McKee. 6'6", 230, smart guy at Stanford, super strong arm. Like, that is no joke. There's a lot of big, slow white guys who get drafted based on being in a pro-style offense and nothing else. Tanner Lee from Nebraska a couple years ago. Like, there's guys like that. McKee has arm talent. It's not like he's just a dope. I like his ability to actually throw off platform, and I like his performance in an offense that was orchestrated by, I'm going to do a hot take here, the most overrated college coach of probably the last decade in David Shaw.
Wow.
Like, I would hear every year, I hear, oh, David Shaw might go back to the NFL. You heard for 4 or 5 years. Then you look at Stanford and they win like 6 games and they're running the wing T like it's the 1940s. And you're like, this guy? This guy? So he's had to deal with that. Like, if you put Tanner McKee in like a Hendon Hooker offense, you don't think he would put up numbers? I definitely think he would.
I think he would. Also, I like David Shaw. I'm not going to go on a whole. We don't got to have a David Shaw conversation right now. But I covered
David Shaw got NFL buzz like last year, and he won 4 games.
He's been getting it every year. He's been getting it every single year. I think it's more. I don't know if he would come as a head coach though. I know there's been like some rumors about that, but I could see him coming to the NFL as just an assistant first. But I mean, he's got a good deal at Stanford. He's doing good there. I know that they haven't had a ton of success. It's hard to recruit for Stanford. Like, it's a tough school to recruit for. Well, first, there's a lot of competition in the area in California, but also, the academics and everything. Well, even still, we can talk about that another time. I'll start with Tanner McKee. We'll kind of just go serpentine, I guess, sort of, because you were just talking about Tanner McKee. Yeah, I mean, you know who I get vibes from when I look at Tanner McKee? Like, you know who he reminds me of if I were to give him an NFL comparison?
Let's see.
There's 2 I have in mind, actually. There's 2. Like his ceiling and then what I think he's going to be.
Are they active now?
Yes, both of them are active.
Is one of them Davis Mills?
No, but I see why you'd say that
Stanford white guy. All right.
Yeah. I'll start with the upside. I think his ceiling. I think if he continues to improve his accuracy, continues to improve the mental side of the game, I think Joe Flacco is his ceiling. I think that's what really tall guy, just a big, physically imposing quarterback, slow as hell, not mobile, doesn't really create outside of the structure of play, but has the size, he has the arm talent. And I think that's kind of what Joe Flacco became at a point in his NFL career. I don't think Tanner McKee will become that. What I think Tanner McKee is more likely is like a Mike Glennon. I think that's more so what we're looking at with him. And that's sorry, like Mike Glennon's not a good quarterback. I think that's more so where I'm at with Tanner McKee. I just think he has such physical limitations, like in terms of his mobility, his inability to create outside of the structure of play. And even still, I don't think his accuracy is great right now, and specifically under pressure. I pulled up a stat before this. His completion percentage dropped from 66% to 41% when he was under pressure last year. That's significant, especially for a guy who's already not mobile. If he's struggling under pressure, what do you do? Like, you can't exactly get him outside the pocket. That's a big flaw, and I don't think he's going to be able to play early because of that. I think if he can improve that part of his game, improve his overall accuracy, improve his anticipation and touch, I think he can be a Joe Flacco. I really do, but I don't think he will. Hendon Hooker is more of a fun, exciting prospect. I think that's more, more people, if they're like talking about guys the Jets could target in the middle rounds, I've seen his name come up a lot more than Tanner McKee. Also on McKee, they already have a guy like, I mean, not that Mike White has the arm that Tanner McKee does, but they already have an immobile, like just statue back there in Mike White. Not that, they might not bring him back, but we kind of already saw
Pokemon evolution where you have Mike White as the first phase, and then Tanner McKee is the second, and Flacco is the final one.
Yeah, exactly. Like the evolution from White to McKee is, oh wow, he's got a really good arm now. Still has other limitations, but yeah, I think that we already saw how that worked with Mike White. I don't think they would go that route with Tanner McKee. Hendon Hooker's a lot more fun. Like you mentioned, dude is like, if he was like 21 years old, I think he's a top first round pick. Like
Even with the injury?
I think he's still a first round pick. I'm fully convinced. With that kind of production in the SEC, with his size and athleticism, I think if he's 21, teams are looking at him as, okay, I don't think he's a top 5 pick, but I think he's someone that they're looking at more in the vein of an Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, where it's like, okay, we can let him sit and develop for a couple of years. Maybe it's like a Jordan Love, where you draft him back half of the first round, mid to back half of the first round, develop him behind an established starter, and then hopefully he can take over. Unfortunately, he's 25. And if you do that with him, you're talking about he's 28 years old before he steps on the field. That's the biggest concern with Hendon Hooker to me. Because from an on-field perspective, from a tape perspective, I love his game. I absolutely love his game. Great production. There are definite concerns about the scheme that he ran, but I'm optimistic that he'd be able to hopefully adapt to the NFL. There'd be a learning curve, essentially. Because like you mentioned at Tennessee, he had a lot of predetermined reads. A lot of predetermined reads, wasn't really asked to go through his progressions very often because that's the system that they ran. It's a very different style. If you're going from like a vertical spread offense to, the Jets West Coast scheme, like that scheme, that's a significant learning curve. And I think you need to take that time with Hendon Hooker. Thankfully, you're probably going to have that his rookie year because I'm not sure he's even going to play because of the ACL injury. So he's probably, at the very least, going to miss a significant portion of his rookie season. Not that you'd want him to play early anyway, so that's fine. But you're realistically looking at he's 26 years old before he can even step on a football field, on an NFL field.
The scheme is really weirding me out, though. Like, I can't get over it. Like, I pulled it up right now. I'm going to list off the quarterbacks since Josh Heupel became the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma in 2011. Then he went to Utah State for a year. And then Missouri, he was the offensive coordinator from 2016 to 2017. Then he goes to UCF. And then he goes to Tennessee to become the head coach. So he's got a pretty strong body of work here.
Did Josh Dobbs crossover with him?
No, he did. Here are his quarterbacks. I'm just going to list off. You tell me if this sounds like an NFL depth chart. Let's remember some guys. Landry Jones. This is first.
Legend.
Blake Bell. So who's a tight end now?
Super Bowl champion, Blake Bell.
As a tight end. So we're 0 for 2 there. Trevor Knight. If you remember Trevor Knight.
I got nothing for Trevor Knight. I know who that is, but I got nothing.
Yeah. Then he goes to Utah State and coaches. The immortal Kent Myers. Kent Myers and Chucky Keaton, the immortals. Then he goes to Missouri and he gets Drew Lock. And Drew Lock is honestly probably the best quarterback he's had.
Drew Lock is Tanner McKee with slightly more minute mobility.
Honestly, Drew Lock might be another good comparison for Tanner McKee, for being honest. But anyway, so he's Drew Lock. Then he goes to UCF, Mackenzie Milton before he gets hurt. Brandon Wimbutt. Oh, my goodness. And then obviously at Tennessee, Hendon Hooker. So this is not an offense that produces NFL quarterbacks. And I think it's at the point where you have to, like the knowledge you have to absorb coming into the NFL from that is so vast that not only is he not going to play year one, but I mean, year two, he's going to be, I think, mentally a rookie in terms of how much he can comprehend. That's not to say Hendon Hooker's dumb or he can't handle it. I think he definitely can. It's just such a gap. So then when's he finally going to hit his stride? Year 3 when he's 27? Like that's a big gamble.
I agree with you. And that's, I'm not really, there's nobody in this class that I'm really like, I want the Jets to draft this guy in the middle rounds. I really have not, from what I've seen. I mean, Jaron Hall almost has similar issues to Hendon Hooker, where it's like, you have the injury concern with him. He's an older prospect. Like there's issues with a lot of these guys. Hendon Hooker is, like, I'll say this about the school, right, and everything with that. I don't think any of those guys you mentioned had the talent that Hendon Hooker has. And I think that's an important distinction. Like, Mackenzie Milton was never going to be an NFL quarterback. It doesn't matter what scheme he was in. He was never – I don't even know a couple of the guys at Utah State. I don't even know who the hell they are. I've never heard of them.
Yeah, Trevor Knight, probably working at Best Buy right now, or like have like an accounting job, or
good for them. But like
Chucky Keaton's a coach, I think so. I could be wrong.
And Trevor Knight was never going to be an NFL quarterback. Hendon Hooker is 6'4", 220. and a great athlete. Like physically, he has it. Like he has it. And his ball placement and accuracy is a lot better than a lot of guys in this class. Like it's not like he's just a physical upside guy. He's a good quarterback. Like right now, I think he's pretty good. Mentally is where it's again, like you said, it's not because he's dumb. It's just adapting from that scheme is a difficult transition. It's going to take him a couple of years to do it because of the injury, and two, because it's a significant gap, essentially. Or it's a significant learning curve. I'd be willing to bet on him at least being an NFL quarterback for a few years. And I don't know if I'm willing to bet on that like with Tanner McKee. I think he's out of the league in like 4 or 5 years. I don't think he's a long-term backup. Hendon Hooker, I think at least can be. And I'd be fine. I'd be happy betting on his upside. I'd like it if the Jets drafted him. I'd be happy about it. But also his age, the injury, and the scheme are significant red flags that you can't just ignore.
Now, fundamentally, if they draft a quarterback after they get Rodgers, I would honestly be more okay with that than if they did it after Carr. Because I think that there's more of a reason to get that next guy if you get Rodgers. So if they take a guy like Carr and then you use a pick on Hendon Hooker, what would your reaction be?
I mean, I'd be happy because I like Hendon Hooker. And I think Hendon Hooker makes sense as someone who you can develop for like 3 years, right? And it sucks because then he's 28, right? Like I know that the age thing is absolutely a concern, and don't get me wrong. But if you want to just sit with Hendon Hooker, develop him for 2-3 years, and then maybe behind Carr, I'm cool with it. I think it definitely makes more sense with Rodgers for sure, because Rodgers, he might be a 1-year solution. Like you don't even know. Carr, at least you expect that he's gonna be there for a few years. If they get Carr, I think it makes more sense to not draft a quarterback in the middle rounds, and then hopefully maybe in a couple of years draft one, maybe early, right? Depending on what's going on with that situation. But I'm cool with it. I agree with you. It makes more sense if they get Rodgers though.
And now it is time for our weekly. We got to put some sort of musical stinger in here. New York Jets weekly draft spotlight.
Yeah.
I was like the Sanford and Son. I was like the Sanford and Son theme or something.
I think like 5% of people listening to this are even going to know what that is. I do know my dad.
You know what? If you know what it is, I salute you because I want to hang around with you. So going into that, our Sanford and Son themed draft spectacular extravaganza, we're going to switch things up a little bit from last week. We're going to focus on exclusively actually, the defensive side of the ball. Justin has a defensive lineman that he's looking at. Now I got a defensive back I got in my mind. I will give my guy Justin the floor.
Cool. Yeah, I know I talked about Keanu Benton a few weeks ago, and I was like debating if I wanted to talk about him again, because I talked about him, I think, when we were talking about the Senior Bowl. So he wasn't like my weekly draft spotlight, but I'll shine a light on a different defensive tackle. Benton is still probably my favorite defensive tackle target for the Jets in this class, but I'll look at South Carolina's Zach Pickens. Zach spelled with 2 C's. I don't know why, but
of course, naturally, yes.
Of course, what else would it be? I think he's a very, very fun 3rd or 4th round target for the Jets. Just a super high upside dude with rare physical traits. He's a former 5-star recruit. I don't think his production ever quite matched the hype, but he's gotten better every year that he's been at South Carolina. 6'4", 305 pounds, great athlete, probably one of the most powerful dudes in this class. He's really versatile as well. I mean, he could probably play anywhere from like a true nose tackle to a pass rushing 3 tech. And I think he has that pass rushing upside to potentially be a 3-down starter in the NFL. Right now, still probably pretty raw. He struggles to beat double teams. He's not super consistent. He'll have games where honestly he disappears. If you watch his tape, he's not the most consistent player. He's not always active, but when he's on, he's on. And I think that's something that you can build off of essentially. I think he's great value in like that middle round, 3rd, 4th area. Probably someone who's going to be a rotational piece early on with the potential to be a 3-down starter by year 2, year 3. I still like Keanu Benton because I think he's a better run stopper than Pickens is at this stage. Benton, I like his pass rush upside, but he's definitely more of a fit for what the Jets are looking for. But if you want to draft Zach Pickens, maybe bring back Sheldon Rankins like a 1 or 2 year deal, and Pickens you can kind of develop to take over that role by maybe 2024 or 2025. I like Zach Pickens. He's someone I'd look at in middle rounds.
I'm glad you brought up Rankins because I haven't finalized my grades for everybody yet. I haven't on Pickens specifically. But I got a lot of Rankins from watching him when he's on. Mm-hmm. Now, I think Rankins might have a little bit higher upside as a pass rusher, but in terms of how Pickens can really just move people, like when he's on, like I remember watching him a couple games against Florida, and that has Osiris Torrance, who's regarded as the best guard in the draft. And I think Torrance got the better of him mostly, but I mean, he performed better against him than a lot of the other potential draft picks. So there's a lot to like with Pickens as just a pure run stuffer, which I think the Jets will need to add at some point. Now, the question is going to be, do you really want to invest maybe even a day 2 pick in him if you don't think he's going to be an amazing pass rusher, which right now I don't. So you're pretty much purely drafting him for run support. So it just depends on how confident the Jets are they can milk that pass rush talent out of him.
But that matchup with Pickens and Torrance was fun. Like, yeah, there's two big dudes, powerful dudes, just kind of mauling each other.
It was Hagler Hearns. They're just wailing on each other.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to go and look at the defensive backfield. I am going to go get a gold domer from Notre Dame, Brandon Joseph, who actually started his career at Northwestern, and he had 6 interceptions his first full year. I know that was the COVID year, and there were some other things. 6 interceptions, 9 in his first 2 years at Northwestern, transfers to Notre Dame, gets 1 interception. So it's not as amazing, but that honestly belies his true skill. This guy is a classic ball hawk, great range, very instinctual, can move around the defensive backfield a lot. Now, I was talking up Brian Branch and JL Skinner in the last couple episodes. They're more in the box guys who are, like better in the slot too. I've seen some success with both of them. Brandon Joseph is a straight off the factory line, deep safety who can get interceptions and turnovers, which I feel like that's probably what the Jets would need. And when you're looking at a guy like LaMarcus Joyner who just needs to be replaced, they can get a high-end guy like Brandon Joseph. Now, there are some concerns. Mostly, he's not really super fast. So that makes his range impressive because he's not like an A-plus athlete. But the lack of long speed could be concerning, especially with all the speedy guys like Tyreek Hill in this division that he's going to, at some point, have to defend. And he was not the best tackler. He tried in run support. He tried. It just is not there yet. He's not really super muscular for a safety. He's like 190, kind of average there. So he's not going to go down and just decleat somebody. So if the Jets want that in a safety, probably not going to take him. But if they just want interceptions and they want deep range, he might be one of the best guys on day 2.
He's like sort of the opposite of what they were drafting when they got Ashton Davis. Like, I feel like they're just totally opposite players because Davis was all traits and like just you were hoping the rest of his game kind of ironed out. Joseph, it's more like the IQ is there. He's got good range. He's not like you said, he's not an incredible athlete, which is again opposite of Ashton Davis. But I like his overall game. I think if you're looking at like what he could be in the future, you're hoping he becomes someone like you're really hoping he becomes someone like Jesse Bates. Like, I think that's a fair comparison. We're just a really smart, intelligent player, great playmaker, creates a lot of turnovers, probably not the greatest athlete. Like, again, he's not Ashton Davis out there, but he's still just a very smart player, a good free safety. I think he'd be a starting caliber free safety. Might take him a year or two, but I think he could play early because I think he's more NFL ready than some of the other safeties in this class. So if they wanted to target him in, the 3rd round or something like that and say maybe he's going to compete for a free safety job in year 1, I'm all for it. I like Brandon Joseph.
That BYU game he played, which was against Puka Nacua, who had a great senior bowl and was going to get drafted, and Jaron Hall, who's a pro prospect, is probably going to be like a 4th-round pick. That was one of the best games I've seen from a defensive back. He was flying all over. It was his best tackling and run support day, too. Yeah. And then he plays Ohio State at the beginning of the year. Not amazing, but definitely holds his own against a loaded offense. So those games in particular kind of sold me on Brandon Joseph. And again, coming from, like, I don't want to completely throw out the Northwestern tape either. I mean, he was a freshman and they were talking about maybe making him an All-American. That is, you don't get that way by accident.
Yeah, for sure. He's one of my favorite mid-round safeties in this class. And there's a few of them out there. But, dude, I don't know what's going to happen next week when we meet up because it's going to be, the Jets might have their quarterback situation figured out. There's probably going to be more we're going to know. Hopefully Aaron Rodgers will emerge from the darkness before then because that is like he should be out by now. Who knows what's going on with that?
Johnny Cash telling him to find his soulmate.
Right? Maybe Derek Carr will have visited another team. I don't know, but I have a feeling that next week's show is going to be a pretty big one. We're going to have a lot to talk about with the quarterbacks. But until then, I appreciate everyone for tuning in, for watching. As always, we thank you all for the support. It's been amazing. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter. Thank you all for joining. You can follow Mike on Twitter at @ByMikeLuciano. You can follow me on Twitter at Justin T. Freed. Follow the Jet Press at the Jet Press. Download the Jet Press podcast wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Music, whatever the other thing you said in the beginning was that I don't even know what
Overcast, baby. Don't disrespect the Overcast listeners.
Absolutely. I have no idea what that is. So if you're listening on Overcast, good for you. I don't know what the hell that is. Also, check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, like, hit that notification bell. You know what to do, all that stuff. We stream live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you all for listening to Jet Press Podcast. I've been Justin Freed. That's been Mike Luciano. We'll see you guys next week.
See you folks next week.